Hey there. Oh, this phone cord might annoy me a little bit. Sorry to start off with a complaint. Let me just see if I can get that to stop. Yes. Alright. So, I'm onto this thought process. I just gotta do this. I just got out of the shower. And I'm like on this mad dash to the camera because I don't want to lose this line of thought, this channel that I'm about to turn on here, because even in the shower, like I was trying to like preface it a little bit, and like it wouldn't let me go into it because I know this is one that I'm not an expert on this, I'm just realizing it. So as I speak it out, I might lose it. So this is going to be one probably I'll watch this later, for my own benefit too. All right. So first of all, let me start with this. In my last video, I shared about my ex, Johnny, or John, as I referred to him in the video. And one of the things I touched on in that video was how I feel like drunk people are annoying. And when I said it, I had a vision. And I didn't share that because it was off topic, but that vision did was alert me to the fact that I was seeing my own shadow, right? Because sure, I can prefer people who are sober, sure. But if I have that emotional charge against people who are drunk or alcoholics, just people drunk, I think, dealing with people who are drunk has marked me, has traumatized me in the past. And at that moment that I was sharing that, I was reminded of that. But, I kind of let it go and went on with my talk there, because in the moment, I don't know, I didn't want to get off topic, I guess, for what I was talking about. And, yeah. And maybe it just didn't catch my attention enough. I'm not sure. But the vision I had when I said drunk people are annoying is this vision of myself caretaking my last boyfriend at a concert where he was very intoxicated. And I remember that what washed over me was the feeling that I had in that moment, like God, like I felt like I was having to take care of my kid. It was it's like this person's an adult and like they're so drunk that they can't even like be right, and it was annoying me. So anyways, whatever. As happens sometimes, the universe is always going to bring us a reflection of the energy that we have. So that energy was coming up to my forefront, right? I said it. I had a vision of it. It was ready to be healed in me. And then last night, an old friend that I haven't been in touch with contacted me out of the blue. I think the last time she called me was about a year ago. She was drunk then, and she was also drunk last night when she called me. And I just thought it was kind of funny, the universe throwing a little wink my way, like, you don't like that, huh? Remember that what we resist persists thing? Like, because I have a emotional charge against that, I am a magnet for those experiences, right? So this old acquaintance or friend, we're not, super close or anything, but there was a time in the past when we were, she just pops up, happens to be drunk, and of course I couldn't deny that the universe is kind of putting in my face a little bit. I'm like, all right. And she wasn't acting stupid, or I wasn't feeling annoyed by her demeanor at all on the call we had. But I was feeling a strong need to have boundaries And because I don't really, because I've been working to upgrade from boundaries to agreements in all my relationships, I sort of like took the opportunity to assert my agreements, like what I agree to having in my life. Okay, so here's an interesting thing. Before I go on to this next part, this is going to lead into the main talk for this. But I want to start with that tidbit about me realizing my shadow. And let you know that earlier today, I spent some time going through that process, acknowledge, validate, accepted that I had that sort of like grudge against drunk people. And I was present with my feelings of sadness and annoyance today so that I could let that go, right? And then once that was out of the way, I started to kind of see a bigger picture of what sort of happened when I started asserting my agreements. Like, I was just basically, I'm going to call them boundaries, but just know that I'm using that term loosely, okay? I was basically I was sharing what I will and won't agree to having in my life. And I was doing it in the kindest way that I could, but also very bluntly. Like, because, like I said, the last time I talked to this person was a year ago. And the conversation had ended abruptly or something back then. And it was sort of a difficult conversation, but it was fine, you know. And the thing about it is just we're not exactly on the same page. We're just not. Like, because I'm on a spiritual journey of doing intense shadow work for years, I'm not going to vibrate at the same place as somebody who's not willing to look at themselves on a deep level. And I'm likely going to trigger them. I'm likely going to trigger the piss out of them because this is how it works, you know? This is how it works. But I respect this person. I like this person. So I wanted to just, you know, share with this person that, like, hey, if we do, you know, happen to grow apart again, like if we don't talk again, just know, like, it's not personal. It doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't mean I don't like you. It just means I just didn't vibe in that place. You know, if I'm vibing with people who are doing what I'm doing, and I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing, which is growing and learning and aspiring to be the best version of me that I can be, right? And if you watch some of my other videos, then you know that what I feel like I'm meant to do, one of the things, you know, I think we're all here to do many things. And one of the things I'm doing here is alchemizing narcissism, right? Healing narcissism. And so when I come in contact with, I'm going to say, like, people from my old life, and I think I referenced this a lot when I shared about my relationship with John, but people in general from that part of my life would have vibed with me in that version that I was. And that version that I was very much coping in narcissistic ways, because that's all I knew. That's how I grew up. That was my program. And the other thing about it is it's not just blatant narcissism, it's covert narcissism, meaning it hides under the guise of kindness and love, or niceness and love, I'll say. And since I've been doing all this shadow work over the years, it has just been becoming more and more clear to me, right? The way it hides in the language and hides in the relating dynamic. And you know, if you've been watching a while, that I have a fair relating reflection deck that I created and I sell on my website. It's handmade cards that I wrote that can help with the transition from dealing in unfair narcissistic coping mechanisms to fair relating. But since I made that deck, there's so much more that I know in a more nuanced way. And I'm not an expert on this, right? Like I'm saying, these are things that I notice in conversation while they're happening. Now that I've healed a portion of me, then when I'm having a conversation with somebody else, it's more clear for me to see it in them, right? and I can feel the subtle energy of it, and I can see how it affects my energy, because I know my energy very well now, because I've spent so much time intimately looking at myself and finding out what's me, what's not me, you know? So anyone who's been talking to me on even on a spiritual level, people who are spiritualists with me, like my life coach would know this, probably Kelly would know this. If you've seen our conversations recently, there was a conversation we had off camera, but that I am very, what's the word I want to say? Sometimes very, why can't I find the word? I'm going to say concerned with, okay? I can't find the right word, so I'm going to say I'm very concerned with the vibration of the words we use. Have you ever heard that, speaking things is like setting a spell, writing a spell, and writing things is like writing a spell. That our words matter, you know? Well, it's true. And when you get clear enough to see these subtle vibrations, you know that very well. And it's like, as you purify, it's hard to miss some of them, you know? I'm not saying that I'm picking up on every single one. I think I'd be quite overwhelmed. But in a succession, I've seen a bunch that I want to kind of address right now from this other angle. A lot of what I've focused on is talking about and teaching us the premises of how we can operate, which will provide us the foundation where these unhealthy habits won't sustain. They won't live there. If we are sovereign beings, that we are not attached to an outcome, and that we are not operating with expectations of other people. Because all those things are forms of us controlling. If we are not sovereign, then we get into that vampirism and that codependency thing. If we are having expectations of others, now we're pulling on their energy towards an agenda that we have. If we are attached to an outcome, we are trying to assert our control on something that we have no business controlling, because we are not the divine creator. Now, I understand that in some cases, such as business transactions, there's going to be something like expectations and attachments to outcomes, right? But I would kind of suggest taking it out of that even. Just because sometimes business doesn't go the way you expect. And you still want to be an adult when you have to handle that situation, right? So we're not in danger of not having those transactions go smoothly if we pull ourselves up to a more mature level to deal with even those things. So, and that's why I'm talking about, instead of having attachment to an outcome, pulling ourselves back to say, well, I agree to this in my life, or I agree to show up in this way, and I agree to deal with you if you show up in this way. And that way, if somebody doesn't show up in the way that we agreed to deal with them, then we can discern whether or not we still remain sovereign. First of all, we're not discerning if we remain sovereign. We are remaining sovereign, and that allows us to discern whether or not we want to continue having experiences with this person, right? We're pulling ourselves back from the situation without being enmeshed and tangled in. And so much of those things that I'm talking about are just like bred into us with these narcissistic relating tactics that go on a regular basis and can pass themselves off as our culture. So I'm just going to talk about some of them that I've been noticing, okay? And like I said, I'm just going to start talking. I'm not an expert on this, and I'll probably be learning this as I talk too. and just seeing what comes out of my face about these topics that have just kind of piqued my interest lately. So one thing I've noticed is, in some cases, with people who I'm bringing through the transition of me doing this, right? So these are people who knew me before, who are going to be still in my life, who now I have to teach that I'm operating in a different way, right? By showing them, by being an example of that, right? And so in this case, with these people, what I've noticed in a couple cases now is when I share what I agree to is for our relationship, right? Like one of the things I was sharing last night with my old friend who happened to pop up was that I don't want to be having conversations on a regular basis with anybody who isn't growing and learning. And I said it like that, right? And she said that kind of felt like tough love. And I understood what she was saying. But I did use an I statement, and I was stating something about me. And it wasn't tough love at all. It didn't mean anything about her. But what it revealed is there are some expectations that she had of me, right? Because now I wasn't living up to the expectation she had, and it felt like something to her. It was her choosing to feel that, right? That this is the enmeshment and the codependency that is all happening in those realms of relating, the old ways of relating. And this is why it's so important that we do make these changes. So not only that, but I've also seen with somebody taking it like I was harassing them, like it was personal, for me to start letting them know that I agree to this standard in my relationships. You know, I'm just stating this is what I agree to in my relationships. This is how I want to live. This is how I am living. It's not a assault on anybody else for me to state how I want to live, right? It's not. The only people who are going to take it that way are people who have an investment in me showing up a certain way that they've expected of me. They're attached to an outcome. They're afraid it's not going to happen the way that they want. So that means they're trying to control me. And one of the ways that people try to control us, which goes under our radar sometimes, is just by trying to make us feel something. Or trying to make us feel obligated to something in order to caretake them or understand them or explain something to them. Now, I know that this can sound really cold, especially to someone who's in those ways of relating and coping. I get it. This is not going to sound like a friendly, fun conversation to those people. They're probably going to be offended, you know? But things kind of changed for me the other day. So I was watching a reading by Jess Puckett, The Chaos Witch, on YouTube. She's really great. I'm one of her Patreon members, and I think this was a live reading on the public channel, but I could be wrong. It could have been a private reading. I don't know. It wasn't my personal reading. It was either the Patreon reading or the public reading. I don't know. But in the reading, she says she got this feeling that like someone was throwing her shade, but she wasn't sure, right? And so she just asked the person in the chat, like, I just kind of get this feeling. Is it, are you throwing me shade sometimes? Like, and so then this person was able to respond and just felt that they were being genuine in their response. And they were able to clear the air very simply by just being brave, vulnerable, and wise. And in that moment, I was like, dang. I was like, that was awesome. That was so awesome because I saw how that simple act, doing that, would have cleared up so much bullshit for me in my past. Like in relationships where I was like, is this person a friend or a foe? I don't know. They're acting kind of shady. I'm out of here. I would just cut and run. That was my way of dealing with that. Instead of being vulnerable enough to ask, just ask. Now, why would you not be vulnerable enough to ask? Now, why would a person not be, right? The reason why I couldn't ask in the past is because I was insecure and I wasn't prepared to hear the answer. So one thing about, behaving in that manner, which is just being straightforward, very adult, mature, and the other ingredient you need is to be able to know that you've got your back either way, like that you can handle whatever the answer is. Because say a person doesn't like you, maybe they'll say, maybe they won't admit it, but you'll probably feel it more when you've directly asked them, and you'll be able to discern from there, right? But maybe they'll tell you what their issue is. Maybe you'll, discuss it from there or whatever. But whatever it is, you've got to be prepared to handle it. And if it wasn't a matter where somebody didn't like you, wouldn't you want to know that? And as long as you can comfort yourself and you have your own back through that situation, then you'll ask. You'll be direct. Oh, if only I could have been direct in my past. I feel like it's a major, soul lesson for me in this lifetime, actually. And it was so beautiful to see, because in the moment she did it, I was just like, it just flashed all these situations in my past where I could have saved myself a lot of trouble. I'm just like, I could have probably maintained some of those friendships, and instead I just cut and run, and left people probably feeling confused. But also, I back then I was thinking, well, if they don't even care enough about me to ask why I'm not around anymore, then whatever, But the thing is, a lot of those people were dealing in those unfair relating dynamics, so they were not in the place to have direct conversations either, right? Like, that's what I was vibrating with. So may not have helped me back then, but boy, would I have liked to have it, especially with one particular relationship I can think of. But anyways, I thought it was very beautiful. And then, it really inspired me to do that for myself in my own life. I thought, yeah, there's no reason why I can't do that too. It makes so much sense. I see it. I see the wisdom in it. And I think it's time that I stop being so immature in that manner as well, and just address things head on. And that's why I felt the need to make sure I was letting people know what I agree to in a relationship with them. And one thing about having these conversations in our relationships is there may be things that come up where we are on an opposing view to somebody else, or we make them uncomfortable because they have to face something within themselves. And I want to say that those who have been used to relating in the unfair manner of our culture, or our general culture, I'll say, they may be very intimidated by this thought and this process, but I really want to invite us to know that when we face something like this together with somebody else who is rational and fair, to be able to work through that with another person instead of cutting and running, it's strengthening of a bond. It's building connection. It's like when I pointed out a video that I watched by Healthy Gamer GG on YouTube, and he talked about how red flags, I don't know, help build a relationship or something like that. I'm not exactly sure of the title, but it was something along those lines. And he pointed out how in the beginning of a relationship, red flags are actually kind of important. He said every successful relationship that he had encountered in his many years of being a therapist involved the couple facing challenges in the beginning of the relationship, because when two people are able to face these challenges together, it builds the relationship. Then you want to be in a relationship with somebody who can face a challenge head on. And if you do that old relating, the narcissistic relating, a lot of what happens in those relationships is we brush it under the carpet, we pretend it didn't happen, we put on our rose-colored glasses, we don't want to be challenged in these ways. We don't want to be made to think that we have to prove ourselves, because then we'll be poked in that wound where we feel like we're not enough. And in actuality, it's not about proving yourself. It's about exercising the skills of a mature person, which is a person who can address challenges head on with another mature person who's also willing to face challenges head on and take responsibility for themselves. We're scared to do this because in the old way of relating, narcissistic relating, when somebody challenges, sometimes it leads to an attack. It's not done on a mature level. It's not done with two people who are taking responsibility for each other. It's done with a person who's pointing a finger at the other person, projecting onto them or blaming them or shaming them or trying to control them. And this can all be done in different ways, right? The tone that you talk with. Like there's a difference between saying, okay, I see that is how you choose to handle this. And, okay, I see that's how you choose to handle this. Do you see how my tone on one of them just insinuated that this person was lesser than me? And that the first one was meant to portray a vibration more of like, I acknowledge you. I acknowledge you. And the second one was meant to make the person feel a way, feel judged, feel shamed, feel like they're lesser. And these are because one of the wounds that is prevalent in the old way of relating, in their old relating paradigm, is shame. And shame is buried down in there, and we don't want to feel shame because it fucking sucks to feel shame. It hurts. It's one of the lowest vibrations. You're in danger when you're feeling shame because it's the lowest vibration, and you're going to attract other things. And you can get in like this little shame spiral thing, and before you know it, like you're in danger. And I'm talking about danger of hurting yourself or doing something stupid that you're going to pay consequences for. And, or coping in such a way that you will put yourself or someone else in danger. So you got to be brave in order to make this transition into relating in a lighter, more fair way, right? You got to be brave enough to be able to face all these uncomfortable feelings that are buried in the ways of relating that is in that old dynamic, the narcissistic way of relating, making people try to feel something or amplifying the way someone feels. Oh, I have a note on this. Oh yeah, it's in my book right here. I wrote a few notes earlier on this topic. I feel like I jumped the rails when I started shifting topics, so sorry about that. I'll get back on the stream in a second here. Let me just grab my notes. Hidden in narcissism communication. Okay, so some people in those old relating, in the narcissistic relating dynamics, can be like enacting their empathy at a time when it's inappropriate. So I had this recently, and it was somebody. Okay, so I was talking to this person, and I was sharing an example from my own experiences in order to give them an example of what I was trying to share with them about what I agree to and what I don't agree to. And basically I was kind of saying like, well, you're not the only one that I'm having to tell these things to. I have somebody else too, and they're also, finding it difficult to hear, right? Because like I said, some people are still in that old way of relating, and they find that me sharing what I agree to in a relationship is offensive to them, and that's because they don't even know that they have a whole agenda when it comes to relating with people. So I was trying to share that, okay, don't worry, you're not the only one. Like, I get what you're saying and why you feel put off by what I'm sharing. I wasn't apologizing. I was just saying, I understand where you're coming from. And then they kind of said, well then why are you even like doing it? Like, they wanted to know, like, why am I even dealing with somebody who would be upset like that with me? See how they flipped it. They took me sharing my agreement with them about what I'm willing to accept in a relationship. And when I tried to comfort them by telling them they're not alone and how they're reacting to it, they flipped it and said, well, why would I want to do it then with this other person? Interesting, right? Very narcissistic. Person doesn't even realize that's what they're doing. They're trying to play me in the emotional way. So they flip it, whatever. I'll go with it. And then I say, well, it's actually my son. And I share that this is the person. And it's like, because this is what my job is. like we're, my son's going to be in my life. And so I have to transition this particular son into this newer way. And then this person immediately goes into what we would call a cold empathy. And she goes, oh, what's wrong? And I was just like thinking, oh my fucking God, right? Like, I'm thinking in my head, but I'm also thinking, okay, I know that she means well. I know that this is just her habit and way of relating. She has no idea how unhealthy and toxic this is, but I can see it, right? So I'm having to like have all this dual stuff to process in my own mind about the conversation I'm now in, which is a conversation in the past that I would just say, oh, fuck this. I'm out. We're on different pages. Sorry, bye. That's what I would do in the past, right? So this is a challenge for me now, because here's someone I care about. I understand where they're coming from. It's not a vindictful place. They're not trying to cause me harm. They genuinely feel this is the appropriate way to behave in relationship with somebody. And they have been using empathy in their lives as like a way to play people, as a way to connect to people or relate to people, or as a way to make people feel like they care, like she cares, right? If you've heard me talk about empathy, what I use empathy for is to amplify energy. That's what empathy is to me. And I use it selectively. And because the higher version, in my opinion, is compassion. Compassion is the natural result of having healed the energy, whereas empathy is being in the vibration that the other is in. Well, lots of people have not healed to the degree I've healed. So when I come in contact with somebody who's in misery, I don't want to use my empathy. I don't want to be in misery with them. I do them a lot better service by staying in my higher vibration than misery. So at least they have a place to reach to, or I will shine a light on whatever's causing them their misery. And they might hate me for it, and they might project onto me, and they might blame me for it. But I know that's just coming from the vibration they're in. I know that because I used to be in that vibration. I know what it's like down there. You know what I mean? So this isn't to say that this person is terrible, wrong, or bad. I'm talking about these nuanced ways, and sometimes very obvious ways, that energy manipulation is happening just through a relating dynamic, and how it's unhealthy. And it's not something I agree to in my life anymore, and something that I'm working to establish as every day, and you can learn it too. If you want to be in a relationship with me, let's not try to play each other's emotions. Let's not try to use manipulative tactics to keep each other in line or attached or contained or indebted or anything like that, So as soon as she was like, oh, what's wrong? She doesn't realize it, but like my vibe's up here, and she just pulled the vibration down here, and I won't go, right? So I'm just like, looking at the, like metaphorically, like looking down at her. Like, I'm like, oh no, get back up here. Get back up here. Nothing is wrong. I was like, I'm simply transitioning. It's just a matter of a process of transition. And, to me, it's like, I want to have conversations with people who know that this is what we're doing. That know in every conversation that what we're doing is always with the aim of bringing our conversation up to a higher level. That we are having conscious conversations that inspire each other to be the best versions of ourselves. That is the kind of conversation I want to invest in, right? I don't want to have to babysit somebody's reactions to their question being answered. And it was like so presumptuous, manipulative. And the way that I know that is just because of the way it felt in the energy. It was like, oh, look at that. It's like pulling the energy down into that, like some sort of low worrying place when there's absolutely no worry. Trust me, if I'm going to do this transition with my son successfully, those low vibrations that she wanted to be in are not going to be at all helpful. I know that we will have success. I see the steps that we're taking. They're mapped out here. They're mapped out and I'm feeling my way through. And I know that we will get there. That's the vibration I'm in about it, And yeah, some of the steps are him kind of being like rubbed wrong or feeling bad about it and then hanging up on me. But then the next time we talk in a couple hours later, he's calmed down and now he's ready to have another conversation. It's working just fine. This is how it works when we're adults and we've got to work through a challenge. Sometimes we've got to give someone a space to work through their part because it's their responsibility to do that, right? Unless they're asking us for help, we've got to let them do that. We've got to trust that they can do that. If I was like calling my son back incessantly because he got upset and hung up, that would be very unhealthy because now I'm trying to control how he feels. Now I'm trying to rescue him from his own feelings. No, I know damn well he's got to feel what he feels about it and it's okay. So it's not about me. It doesn't hit me personally. You know what I mean? Because I've been careful to know that what I'm sharing with him, I use I statements. I'm talking about me. I'm not telling him he needs to do anything different. His response is because what I need was he's realizing what I need might conflict with what he wants me to need. That's what he's realizing, and he's going to adjust to that. So there's nothing wrong or bad about the process of transitioning out of the old way of doing things, right? It's just a process. It's just a process. And, sure, ideally I would be doing it with somebody who was aware of what we're doing and we both agree to doing it. But that's not the case in this particular instance, right? And that's okay too, because I'm learning something different about that too, right? How I'm learning how to do it with somebody who is not necessarily on board. And it's working and it's beautiful, right? So, okay. So, and that just brought me to just like this girl wasn't the only one that I've seen do that. My mother, another person who does that. She'll jump to, oh, that's so awful. And I'm like, no, it's just a matter of fact. It's not so awful. Because like I am not catastrophizing everything. Why? Because I know I can handle things. I know I can handle challenges. I know I'm willing and able to face a challenge that comes in front of me. So I'm not automatically worried when there is a challenge. I'm not automatically sinking into victimhood when there is a challenge. You know what I mean? And so now that I'm not doing that, now when I see the other people doing that, what I see and feel energetically is their vibration is going zoop. They're falling into a little hole. So just imagine this, right? If they were talking to somebody who wasn't me, who didn't know about what I know, who wasn't making conscious efforts to break away from those habitual ways of relating, right? Instead, they were talking to someone who was in the habit with them of relating in that way. What those people are doing is keeping each other in perpetual loops of low vibes by going back and forth, because cause and effect. Cause and effect. They speak it or they put energy into it, and now that exists. That exists. If they further go to tell a story about it, like, oh, that's so awful, they just made a spell. They just wrote a spell that they're inviting this other person into. And now they're both going to be there. Oh, this is awful, meaning they're victims. It's like unnecessary. I know you don't know that when you're in it, because when you're in it, you just think your emotions rule you. You think that you're just a victim to your emotions, that you don't have control over it, when you really do. You know, I've been studying emotions, and I don't know if you've ever heard me say this. If you've watched all of my videos, you might have caught this one, but in human design, I have a channel of emoting. And this channel causes the emotions to change. So, when I talk to somebody, if they're stuck in a pattern or a loop of emotion, or they feel a certain way about something, chances are that just by me naturally being me, expressing and being myself, it will push them to another way to feel about it. So it's my energy automatically tries to get people unstuck. It does that, right? But the way it happens for me is I am constantly experiencing all their ways to feel about a thing. So that's why when I make major decisions, I like to wait 3 days, so I can cycle through all the ways to feel about it. And then when I know all the ways there is to feel about it, I know which one is right for me. That's how I make decisions, major ones. And that's how I know that we are not a slave to our emotions, that we can choose how to feel. And we don't know that when we are programmed with reactions and coping mechanisms, and we're stuck in loops of energy, and we're just reacting to things, right? So those are all the shadows, the programmed ways of response. And when we have them all still intact from our childhood, and we're operating from our subconscious most of the time, it's pretty unlikely that we have the clarity in the room to see that about emotions. We probably think that we're just a slave to them, that the one we're feeling is ours, and that this is what it is, you know? So I get it if people have a hard time understanding what I'm saying and acting like they can't choose like I can. There's probably just some work to do before you get to that point, you know? Okay, but when you're in those narcissistic ways of relating, you'll never get to the point where you can do it. Because, like I said, you're stuck in cycles, and then you're writing this spell and pulling other people into the spell with you. And then you're looping in what's called the hell realm, in the narcissistic relating dynamics, where you are playing each other's emotions, you're relying on someone outside of you to reassure you, to validate you, to comfort you, to agree with you. Everything is focused on looking outside of yourself. All that's going to do is get you in trouble. All that's going to do is make you a prisoner. You have to take responsibility for yourself, and you have to start looking within to make your choices like this. You have to. Being sovereign is a key component to being free. Okay. Discussing others not in relation to own experiences. Okay. So here, a short way to say that is gossip, right? So say we're talking to somebody and we're talking about something that happened between us and another person. And now we've got a third friend, right, who wasn't involved in it, but we're telling them about something that happened between us and another person. Maybe we want an outside perspective. Okay? Maybe we know how we feel, but now we just kind of want a reflection of it, right? Maybe this would happen a lot in the transition between looking outside of yourself fully and taking full responsibility for self, right? Because ideally you won't need somebody else's perspective to validate your own, but just say you do, or say you just want to reflect. It's a human thing, right? And like I said, we're starting from being completely codependent in most cases. So there's going to be a transition period, right? Transitions are valid. So say you are now talking to another person. You need to reflect on the whole situation. So even just the talking about it is helping you see your own self and see how you feel about it. But what you're talking about is a situation you had with another person. Now you're telling another person that wasn't there, but you were there. That's not gossip. That is you trying to process. That's valid. I feel like that's not a problem. And it may be that the benefit of doing so is more beneficial than the detriment. However, I think it is worth noting that there could be a detriment. So if you were telling this third person about what happened between you and another person, and it wasn't for the purpose of you processing, meaning you weren't trying to just recap it and think about it or put the pieces together within a context of something bigger, but you were instead wanting that person to agree with you on how you acted. You wanted them to validate how you acted in that situation. Now you're getting into the troubled waters, because now it's like mob mentality, right? You're trying to recruit somebody else to your view, and you're bypassing whatever it is in you that needs to have somebody else agree with you. It's an insecure part of you. So if you find yourself doing that, okay, fine, stop and look at the part of you that feels it like it needs somebody else to agree with you or to see it your way. Maybe you inside really feel like you did it wrong, and maybe you're just trying to not feel how that feels. Maybe you're trying not to feel shame. Because the narcissistic way of relating tries to avoid shame at all costs. That's why we go to the third person and try to get them to see it our way, because then we can rest and feel like, oh, yeah, they see it that way too, so I'm right. All it is a whole tactic that's designed to help you avoid feeling your own shame. If you can get brave and feel your own shame, guess what? You're not going to be haunted by that situation ever again. It's not going to repeat and loop in your head about, oh, that time that you did that. You're not going to have to avoid that person. And you'll probably, if you alchemize it, you'll end up changing your behavior. So you acknowledge that you did it, validate why you did it. There's a reason why you acted that way. It's valid for you. Accept that you did it. Be present with the feelings, even if it's shame. That's automatically going to free you from having to do behaviors that avoid feeling that shame from that. And one of the behaviors that was going to help you avoid the shame is go to tell that third person and get them on board with you. Instead, maybe you'd go to the original person and go, ooh, I really messed up. I realize it now. That sucks. And I have realized that I won't be behaving that way anymore. Right? It's better than an apology because it's changed behavior. And that's real. The word I'm sorry, it's nothing. That in the narcissistic relating dynamics, sorries is sometimes just thrown around to entitled people who feel like by entitled people who feel like if they say sorry that you have to accept it. No. Change behavior, that shows a person that you really got it. That whatever pain you may have caused them, that you didn't waste it. And that's what's noticed by the universe, because you're balancing your own karmic loops. You're not. So if you didn't do that, if you didn't admit your own shame, admit your wrongness, and instead you tried to bury it and deny it within yourself and just not see it and enact somebody else's approval of your way of handling it, right? If you did that instead, what you literally just did was form the loop in your energy. And now, guess what? Further up the road in your journey, you're going to have another similar situation. It's going to poke you in that same feeling that you haven't been allowing yourself to feel. Maybe you run back to that same third friend and be like, oh, it happened to me again. Another person's like that. Like, no, actually, the universe just gave you another chance to redeem yourself. You're always getting chances to redeem yourself. That's what it is. It's a loop of energy waiting to be resolved, right? So if we are not so invested in avoiding our own shame, if we're brave enough to be present with whatever feelings we have, knowing that it's a wave of energy, the emotion is a wave of energy. The feeling is our interpretation of the wave of energy, which has to do with the story we tell ourselves about it. And they're always just passing on through until we let it be part of our experience and then misunderstand it, or become too overwhelmed to process it, therefore not understand it. And now we lodge it in our system and it becomes a loop of energy that we forever live out repeatedly in a loop until we find the bravery. So, say in those narcissistic relating dynamics, you've done this a million times, you've stepped on a lot of toes, you've got a lot of loops that you haven't dealt with and that you've been in denial of, right? Well, your view is clouded by all those loops. You're seeing life through the lens of that. So emotions can become really scary to you sometimes, right? All kinds of crazy things can start happening because now you're in a backlog. You're not seeing life clearly. You're acting out of coping mechanisms, which are just your ego's way of allowing you to behave in ways that it feels will help you avoid having to feel that feeling or have that experience again. And then you see how when you have all those going on, you're not the authentic version of yourself. You're actually a mask. You're a version of yourself that's just trying to protect yourself from feeling things. And the real you never has room to come out because you're just a bunch of reactions. Let's see what else I got here. So yeah, I would say like the other thing to think about when we are discussing others, not in relation to ourselves. So say you start talking about their story. It's two people over there. It didn't happen to you. You weren't involved, but you know about their story. I'm guilty. I've done this. I've done all of these things, by the way. All of these things, I've done them. And more, you know? So you talk about those two people, not in relation to you. And what you're doing is writing a spell and putting it towards those people. If those people vibe really high and they don't have insecurity, then it's probably not going to affect them. But if they do have low self-esteem and they're insecure, it could find their way into their energy body. It could stick to them. It becomes a burden to them. But the universe wants balance. And the universe knows that came from you. It's still looped to you. You just stuck yourself to them. You've burdened them. Guess what's going to come back to you? It's just a way to burden yourself. Cause and effect. So imagine the people that are so busy gossiping about other people all the time. They can't get any traction in their lives. Okay. I feel like I'm not an expert on that topic, so I feel like I'm going to just move on to my next point. And maybe I'll find out more about that later. Can't trust them to not make it mean something else. Yes. So here's another thing I found that, like, when I was talking to my friend who was still in narcissistic relating dynamics within herself, right? I didn't want to share anything intimate about myself because I couldn't trust her to not make it mean something else. And if you watched my talk show with Kelly recently, talk show number 1, we touched on this topic, how we can do like this implied meaning. Was it in my healing session? I know we talked about implied meaning. Yeah. So anyways, that's a narcissistic relating tactic. Making it mean something that it doesn't mean. Right? Making it mean something that it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that. What's a good example? Give me a good example, Spirit. Like, I'm facing a challenge, and it means that I must be sad or suffering or burdened. You know? It's like, no, it doesn't mean that. Facing a challenge just means that I'm tasked with looking for solutions and being open to them and taking the inspired steps, right? It means, okay, I have a challenge here. It's my feminine energy that gets the information about how to move forward. Like, what is my solution? Maybe I'm going to meditate. Maybe I'm going to take my mind off of it if I've been worrying too much. And then I will get a download, an inspiration, an intuition about what I can do to solve it. And then I need to use my masculine energy to take the action. These two energies exist in all things. Every man, woman, and child. Every desk. Everything has masculine and feminine energy. So you have to be able to utilize both. The feminine receptive energy to get the inspiration, the inspired idea, which is going to be the solution. And then the masculine energy takes action. Things aren't just going to, like you get the inspired idea on how to solve it. It's not just going to happen for you. You still got to use your masculine energy to take the steps. You've been inspired to want a red dress. You got this vision of yourself in the red dress. Ooh, it just feels like that red dress is just, ooh, it has to be yours. It's yours. It's going to feel great. You want it. You got the money for it. What are you going to do? Just like hope the store decides to ship it to you randomly by accident? No, you need to now enact your masculine energy. You know what you want. Now you need to go get it. You got to take the masculine energy that you've been gifted with at birth and take some action. Take the steps. Go to the store. Get a ride. Get the money out of the bank or bring your credit card, whatever, however you do it, right? The masculine energy decides how to do the thing that needs to be done, right? Because the masculine is very logical. It knows, okay, well, I got to make sure there's gas in the car. I got to make sure I got a way to pay. I got to lock my house when I leave. I got to drive over to the store. Oh, I need some groceries. I'll stop there on the way as well. That's the masculine's job. The masculine part of it that's in me, I'm saying, or in anyone. But these two things work together. So in this narcissistic energy, in ways of relating, there's a problem. And now all of a sudden, if I shared that I was facing a challenge with you, and you all of a sudden make it like it's the worst thing ever, and oh, I'm so sorry that you're going through that, and that's really awful, and that must be so hard. And it's like that's a lot of things that you're attributing to my life that aren't relevant for me. you know? So making it mean something else is a very common thing. And there could be different reasons that it's done. Sometimes to make you feel bad or lesser, or sometimes to kind of establish this connection based on a shared feeling. So the person wants to feel bad with you. So they invite you down to that place to feel bad. It's like, well, no, thank you. No, thanks. I would rather just face my challenges. Thanks. You know? The old way of relating, though, would have us thinking that we had to moan and groan and whine and complain and let people feel bad for us and get some sympathy, and how about some empathy too? And yeah, compassion is fine, but okay. I mean, it's not my favorite, but okay. You know what I mean? Why are we trying to elicit things from other people? Why do we need them to feel a way or to get on board with it? We're not capable of handling our own feelings, that's why. In the narcissistic way of relating and coping, we are suppressing and denying all kinds of feelings that we haven't been allowed to feel. So that's why we act in those ways. So if we just, like I said before, get brave and willing to feel what there is to feel, and it's ours, and we don't really need permission from someone else to feel the thing we feel. If it's a feeling and it's with us and it won't leave, be present with it. That's it. It's just a feeling. It doesn't even define you. It's not yours to keep forever. It's just passing through. It's a wave of energy. It doesn't even mean anything about you. It's a data point. It's a piece of information. That's it. Okay. All right, so here's an example. So, this friend of mine, this old friend of mine, sent me a text today, just sort of as a follow-up to our conversation, and asked me how my kids are. And, you know, on the surface, that seems like a nice thing, right? That seems like a nice thing to ask, right? But I immediately felt the vibration of it as like, oh, I mean, there's nothing I can say. There's nothing I can say that would be a high vibe right here, because this isn't a high vibe question. This is a narcissistic relating tactic, right? I recognize it from my mother's family. My mother's one of 11 children. And one of the habits that I was trained into from her was like that everyone tells everyone else's business. Because in her family of 11 children, that's how they all found out about each other's stuff, right? You got to keep up with what's going on with your brothers and sisters, so you're going to find out about it from someone else, because you're probably not talking to all 11 of them every day, right? So it's like a little telephone game with them. Like somebody passes along the stuff. And it's like when someone dies, I get it. I get that we need to pass along the information, and you're not gonna speak to the person who died, probably, right? Or their family members sometimes even. It's something that we need to be aware of, though, that this is dark magic. It's not the kind of dark magic where, you know, someone is intentionally trying to cause harm. But when you are telling somebody else's business to somebody else, you're literally writing a spell. So we know that the version of the telephone game is that the news gets messed up by it gets to the end of the line, right? It's like the message that was in the beginning isn't the same message that comes out at the end usually. So we know things get twisted, right? So we need to keep these things in mind, that we're actually writing spells with our storytelling about other people. That is going to come back on us. The universe is seeking balance. And maybe this is the reason why some of your manifestations don't come in as easily, because there's 10 people out there telling a story that opposes it. Why do you think it's most people who are manifesting successfully aren't telling you what they're manifesting? They don't want people to know about it. Why? Because if you put your ingredient in my soup pot, I'm not going to get the soup that I was trying to get. Or you might even delay it. Might make it harder for me to get, or whatever. Probably more like a delay than anything, right? So also when you're doing this, like the consequences for doing this is you have taken your focus off from the only place where you have control, which is over your own self. And you might say, oh, well, you're saying I have control of those other people when I write a spell about them. Yes, you can project energy onto other people, and yes, it can affect them. You'll always be living out the result of that, the consequence for that. And the consequence for that is that you just left yourself vulnerable because you took your focus off yourself, so you're not growing and learning yourself. That person might even get so much stronger because they're having to deal with all the projections, so you might even be helping them grow faster and stronger. Meanwhile, you're falling behind. So if what you're projecting onto that person is envy and jealousy, you're actually pushing them ahead, way far ahead of you, even further. So it's an interesting thing how that works. It's like even those people who are doing it intentionally for dark reasons are actually helping the people who are doing the work. But if it's not a person who's doing the work, yeah, you're passing back and forth low vibe energy, just trapping each other back and forth. Oh, I'm a victim to you. Oh, I will get you. Oh, I'm a victim to you. Oh, I will get you. Oh, that's nice. You guys are just playing in the mud. That's all you're doing. So when she asked me how my kids are, and I'm like, I don't want to, first of all, I don't trust her to not make it mean something else if I were to share, and it's not my business to share. And my kids are great, but like, it's not like she hasn't talked to me in a year. What does it matter to her? Like what? It didn't matter to her yesterday, you know? It didn't matter to her the day before. Like why would I, go into any detail about what's going on in my children's lives with somebody? Say I was talking to like my life coach and I was having a contemplation about an experience I had with one of my children. Maybe then I would share with my life coach what my experience with my child was, because I want my life coach's reflection or insight, right? Here's a valid reason. But like this girl is in the narcissistic relating dynamic tactics, and so she is expecting that I'm going to like tell her what, update her on my kids and be like, oh, this one's doing this, this one's doing this, this one's doing this. And I was just like, oh, I see how low vibe that is. We've got to stop doing that to each other and to our kids. It's not okay. Like, why I'm going to write a spell about my own kids to this girl? For what? For her to possibly have some fake empathy? Possibly make it mean something it doesn't mean? What purpose does it really serve? So that she can feel connected to me? No, what I feel already from the interactions I've had with being in my energy and then with somebody who's in those older ways that I used to relate is oh, I don't trust this. This isn't right. We've got to stop this. I do not agree to this, right? So then I realized, okay, well, what I can share with her is like how my relationship is with my kids. So I tell her, well, I can tell you that my experiences that I'm having with my children have been great. I've loved all of them, and I'm so glad that I've made the efforts to change the way that I relate to them and communicate with them. And that's true. That's real. And that was my experience with my kids. And that's how we are. That's how they are, right? So I found a way out of that, and my solution came when I faced the problem. I felt the energy. I was like, ooh, I don't want to go down there in that energy. And then I just had an inspiration to go, well, you can speak honestly from your own experience, because that's not gossip. I'm like, oh yeah, all right, cool. My experience is this. That's how my kids are. So, and then I did face the problem of like, okay, well, I know from that old relating dynamic, she's probably expecting me to ask how her kid is. And of course, I care how her kid is. Like, I want her kid to be well. But like, I wasn't thinking about her kid 2 days ago before she contacted me, I assume that her kid is on their life path doing well. I want that for them, whatever God's plan is, that's what they're living, right? I can't really concern myself with knowing better for them than they know for themselves. So what good does it do me to know how they're doing? Unless they're coming to me and asking me a question or whatever, I'm going to assume they're doing great, that, and if it's not great, that they're doing how they're supposed to be doing, right? Because it's all a divine orchestration. And when we're meant to break out of something, when we're meant to face something, it's going to be the next thing in front of us. We're going to know, because it's going to be the thing that's irking us, or we can't get it out of our head, or we just keep seeing signs and symbols about it, or 3 times we hear different people telling us the same thing, and it gets our attention and we notice a pattern. It's going to be those things that we're ready to face. So if you hear me talking about these things, and you hear me speaking passionately and like strongly and telling you how I believe it is, it doesn't mean that you have to make these changes if it's not right in front of you, if you don't believe in it. But for me, I will require myself to have these high standards in how I relate going forward. And I will also allow myself to know that if I catch myself falling into an old habit, that it's okay, and I will bring myself back up to a higher standard on that thing when I notice it. And it's all okay, right? Because like those older ways of relating, they didn't feel so terrible before I purified my energy body. I was in them too. I did all that too. I've gossiped. I've told somebody's, news to another family member. I have told how my children are. I've complained. I have even complained about the challenges that I've been in. I have been puzzled about people. I've asked somebody else about somebody else. I've done it all, right? So I've seen the other side. I understand where it's coming from, and I'm not saying that, it's an evil thing to do. I'm just saying like it's a covertly narcissistic way of operating when we are so enmeshed and entwined with needing to make other people feel things, or make other people agree with us, or get their validation, or validate them, or just like not taking responsibility for ourselves and how we feel and where we are in our own process. And the narcissistic thing is that it's so ironic, right? Because even though my friend is asking how my children are, like I said, like she didn't care 2 days ago how they were. So it's a fake thing to feign concern. It's like there's no real concern here about my children, because if you were concerned, like you would have asked like last year or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, so we in these narcissistic relating dynamics, we act like we care a lot. We act like we care a lot. And that's why we grow up in these households and we think we're loved. But then we grow up as adults and all of a sudden we're anxious as fuck and depressed, and we've got addictions, and we can't feel our feelings, and we're not allowed to act that way, and we're gossiping behind people's backs, and we are too afraid to be vulnerable in front of people, and we feel insecure, but we can't admit it. And it's like, hello, something went wrong here in the process. You see? When the whole nation is on fucking antidepressants, I think we got to look at some things a little bit deeper, right? Because if this care was real, This is not how the children would turn out when we're adults. It's not. So the narcissism is like, the care is fake. The care is fake. And it's all about playing of emotions or suppressing and denying emotions. Which ones are appropriate to feel? Which ones are okay? And acting like emotions makes emotions mean something about you. Yeah, acting like emotions mean something about you. Well, any single person can feel rage, anger, despair, joy, bliss. We all have access to the whole range, okay? And some people might be like, well, I don't have access to joy and bliss. Look, I know. And that's because you got a lot of reactive programs. So it's probably going to be a while of doing some shadow work before you can reach those places. I get it. It's hard. And you might not even have a glimmer of hope to believe that would be possible. Maybe you've tried a lot of things. But if you haven't tried shadow work, if you haven't tried going into the emotion and being present with it, and being brave and taking full responsibility, if you haven't tried that, then it might be worth a try. You know what I'm saying? Now, I know that some people don't have the skills or the safe place to do it in. And so I do urge anyone who's going to tackle this to not be afraid to have some support and some help for what you're doing. Whether that's a therapist or a support group or a life coach or like a spiritual teacher or counselor or self-help books, you know. When I say being sovereign and taking full responsibility for self and not looking outside of self for somebody else to tell you it's okay, please don't forget that I talked about a transitional period. Please remember that I said it's okay when you're in transition to still go for those things, right? It's like when you're riding a bike, some kids start out with the training wheels. That's okay too. We're all different. You know what's best for you. You know what you need. So don't be afraid to reach out to professionals and enact professional help where you need it. Especially if you feel like you can't face these feelings without harming yourself or others, right? You have to be responsible about all of this. So taking responsibility is knowing, can I actually handle feeling this? You know, am I safe enough to do it? And if the answer is no, then you know that you have to take responsibility for getting yourself into a safe place to handle it with the support you need. So I feel like I said, a lot of my talks previous to this one had been based on laying the premises for a foundation where those older ways of relating wouldn't hold up. And I feel like this talk is more about like the reasons why, and like why it's not working and why it's so hard to notice, and and how it's very nuanced, and how, you know, if you don't feel the vibration of it, like I have, and you're busy with a bunch of stuff that you haven't processed yet, looping in the background, you're probably not even noticing that it is low vibe. You're probably not even noticing that it is unhealthy. So this isn't to beat you up if that's where you're at, right? I was there too. This is just coming to my awareness. And I think a key factor was when I saw Jess Puckett on her live ask that person if they were throwing her some shade, because that was like an example for me of like, oh, look at that. Look how powerful it is to assert yourself into a place, just as a matter of fact. And like, you can't do that in those narcissistic relating dynamics. And I just saw the contrast right there, and I was like, oh, damn. Oh, like it like woke me up to another level. And I was like, huh, it's such a simple shift, right? And it just goes along with all the other shifts I've been doing, right? Like, it took me a lot of work to get here. I had to clear a lot, right? I had to start putting myself in this place where I'm feeling gratitude. I'm letting go of past ways, right? So while I was in them, I wasn't letting go of them, you know? I was still in them, and maybe I still have some things going under the surface, and I'll find them when I'm meant to, if I do. But I feel the vibration of words a lot of times, you know what I mean? So I've been kind of leading myself up to this for more than a year, because I would be talking to someone on a spiritual conversation and be like, oh, this word is higher. Can you feel that? You know, and some spiritualists can feel it, right? If you're feeling energy, then you can feel the difference between pride and honor. You know, you can feel the difference between admiration and inspiration, right? And I'm not saying pride and admiration are bad. I'm just saying they are lower than these other words, right? So I'm just raising my standards. That's what I'm doing. And I'm inviting you to come along too if you're feeling the negative effects of relating in those old ways. If you're finding that you're not able to foster connections with people, and that it's like you can't be the real you, and that you always have to brush things under the carpet, and you can't be vulnerable, and you can't trust somebody with your news and or even your success, and you know, just like all those things that go along with that old way of relating that are just so bleh, you know? When I say this, how does it feel to you? Let me know. I'll be curious to see how other people are viewing it.